Hi, podcast listener. Welcome to Truth About Exits, a show dedicated to pulling back the curtain to reveal what it really takes to get deals closed. You'll hear directly from founders of companies who have raised capital, sold their companies, and even those who acquire other companies for growth. I'm your host, Corin Woodmass. I'm a deal maker, advisor, and when I'm not closing deals, I love to talk to others about their deals and what it took to get them closed. And now you can listen into these conversations too. For all the show notes and more resources, go to truthaboutexits.com. And we are live. Today we are joined by a former client of ours and good friend of mine, Jason. Jason, thanks for jumping on the call.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So as I mentioned, Jason was a former client of ours. We helped him sell one of his brands. And what we're going to talk about today is that whole process, how Jason built up his brand. We'll talk a little bit about the broad strokes of that business, why he wanted to sell, talk about the sell process, and more importantly, what he's working on now. So Jason, could you give us a little bit of background before you started the brand that we sold?
Sure. This was my second e-commerce company, and I had sold my first one, and it was a very small sale, but it was like my first thing that I did, and I had enough cash to take off traveling and not have to work for a little while. And I needed to do something that I wasn't tied to any specific location, and basically got turned on to private label style products and started working on that when I was living in Thailand and then Bali. And it became like sort of a lifestyle business where it was funding my travels at one point. I kind of kicked back and cruised for a little bit, enjoyed that life, spent many days at the beach, learned to surf. And then I realized, okay, business is doing all right, but I'm going to be wasting a big opportunity if I don't focus on that. And then I decided to focus and grow it. And then, less than 2 years later, we sold the company for, a significant sum.
Nice. Okay, so you essentially had the 4-hour work week and got bored. That's a pretty common theme amongst our circle of friends, at least, the entrepreneurs that just can't really sit still. The business was kicking off really good cash flow, and we can talk a little bit about that business, but suffice to say, it was a nice lifestyle business still, even though you were growing the business. So what was the main reason you contemplated selling and then pulled the trigger on selling the business?
I guess one of the main reasons is I wasn't passionate about what I was selling at all. And at one point, I got really bored and I had hired an employee and I had all this time on my hands. And then I felt a little guilty. I'm like, I'm making pretty good money, living in a really pretty cheap place very nicely. And I just realized like this wasn't my 10-year business or 15-year business. And I was at the point of, well, I can keep growing it or I could focus on selling it and using the money to do something I really wanted to do. And ultimately, I decided to do that.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, we have a lot of clients in the same boat. They build up the cash flowing asset, realize that it's got to a point where it's valuable, and it's in a point with you. The business was a very sellable condition when we went to market, which was awesome. So, okay, well, let's fast forward a little bit. So we went through the process of taking the business to market. We had a number of buyer conversations. Now, it was a little while ago we actually went through this. I was thinking about this before the call. So do you remember the first buyer, the offer that we got? I thought this was interesting that didn't end up buying the business. Do you remember how that went down?
I believe so. I believe I was in Georgia, the country at the time. I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So we had a buyer, and I'll talk broad strokes. Obviously, we've got NDAs in place with a lot of buyers and the eventual buyer as well. So I just want to highlight one point here that was a big learning for me. This was a couple of years ago we did this deal. So as far as broad strokes goes, the buyer was from the US. I'm Australian, if you don't know already, listener, and Jason was in Georgia. So while Jason is from the US, he was overseas as well. And everything was fine with the deal up until getting to the LOI point. We had a stipulation in the LOI of a small deposit being held in third-party escrow that both the buyer and the seller agreed to an escrow company. So that was very clearly defined in the LOI. Everything was signed. That was all great. And there was some massive resistance from the buyer putting money into a third-party escrow service. And that's what eventually killed the deal. He was basically asking for information before that money was deposited. So what I've learned on that deal and subsequent deals is, even if, and this buyer had acquired other businesses as well. So one thing I want to highlight, the reason I'm mentioning this is selling the business is not only emotional from the seller's side. You're giving up your asset. You've maybe put a lot of time, energy, tears into building this asset, this business. It's also really stressful on the buy side. So things come out of the blue, and sometimes that can actually kill a deal. So we ended up killing that deal, moving back to market, and we've found the eventual buyer. So that the sale process on this with the final buyer was actually pretty straightforward. But let's talk about the transition and handover part, because the buyer that bought your business was relatively new to selling on Amazon, or completely new to selling on Amazon, not new to e-commerce. So could you walk us through just the broad strokes of how that worked for you and how that kind of played out?
Yeah, absolutely. Essentially, first thing we did, I think we had a company come in and do an audit themselves. I don't know if we can mention the company name.
Yeah, so Centurica.
Yeah.
They're a lot of buyers will use Centurica. They're a cool firm. They're a third-party verification service,
Which I thought was actually very smart of the buyer, and they were very clear and straightforward, and they found a couple things I expected them to find and was clear in the deal. Their research was thorough, and they even checked to make sure my deposits are what I said they were. So that was very smart of the buyer, and I recommend that to anyone buying a business for sure. And then the handover was basically, since he was already in e-commerce, he understood, supply chain and ordering, and he needed to be walked through we spent quite a bit on Amazon PPC. And even though those campaigns were set up, they still need to be monitored. So we spent some time there, spent some time on how I found products to launch, what I did, and kind of my strategy. And then I also had an employee, which I believe he took on, and I'm not sure if she still works for him. I think we had allotted like 30, 40 hours of training, and we probably only used 15, I would say. And he was a smart guy, and he picked up on things really quick. So he made it really, really simple.
Awesome. That's a good tip. If you've got someone that is a private buyer on a deal, oftentimes they'll ask for more. They're basically not sure what it's going to take to hand over the business. And in your case, you had a lot of SOPs, you had the staff member the contractor that could go with the business. So a lot of it was already hands off. And that made it a lot easier and faster when it comes to the transfer. If you're getting to that transfer stage and you're just figuring out how to do what you do and it's only you, that's going to take a lot more time. So it was a great thing that you'd actually put that all in place prior to going for sale. So that was awesome.
Yeah, and to preface that, I mean, I was only working about 2 to 4 hours a week on the business at that time, but in order to do that, he needed those SOPs and at least one employee who had everything together, and that made the business way more sellable and marketable, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a very common theme with an Amazon-based business, because so much of the operations is hands-off, right? Amazon take care of a lot of stuff as well. They charge you for it, but they take care of a lot of that stuff. Right. So a buyer that isn't used to that ecosystem will dig into those numbers and think that there's something missing. You can't be only working these few hours. So yeah, that's quite a shock to buyers that are new to this space, which is why so many buyers are interested in this space, which is awesome. Okay, cool. So let's move forward a little bit. So you've closed the deal, you've done the handover, you're sailing off into the sunset. What did you do next?
Well, before that, I actually wanted to mention something that might help people. The buyer was pretty concerned about Amazon and the risk associated with, my business was 99% primarily on Amazon, as is a lot of people's. And he was a bit concerned because, I had a couple products that were taken down from Amazon and I got them back up, or, somebody complained and I had to get them back up. I actually had SOPs for those problems, and I was pretty good at getting a product back on if they took it down within 24 hours. And I think that did a lot to calm his nerves about that. So I wouldn't hide the fact if that's happened to you, and just document what you've done to reinstate those products. And I think you'd be ahead of the curve there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point, actually. And, that's becoming more and more the norm. There are always issues with Amazon from time to time. So yeah, having that documented and a timeline as well of what happened each time something happens, put it in a folder and just write some notes, especially a timeline. And if you can cut that timeline down next time and know exactly what to do, that puts the buyer at ease for sure. That's a great point you brought up there. Excellent.
Absolutely. So what did I do after the exit?
Yeah, let's hear it.
It's kind of an interesting story. Right after we had a deal signed, deposit, and I mean that literally the last thing to do was for him to transfer money to pay for the inventory and the final payment. I had a diving trip planned in the Philippines, and I rented the nicest hotel on that little island, which is definitely not a 5-star resort. Let's put it that way. A little island of Coron, and I didn't realize they only had like internet access for maybe an hour a day, and it was spotty there. And we were actually closing the deal, the money situation during that time. And I look back now and I kind of laugh, but had I known that, I would have postponed that trip. But at the same time, we closed the deal, money was in there, it was done. And then I went diving for 3 days and it was just an amazing time. So,
oh, that's awesome. Sometimes you can forget to actually celebrate the win. And that was awesome that you had that trip already planned. So yeah. I'm curious. So I know that we'll get into what you're doing next, but how long did it take you before you got that itch again to work on the next project, which you're working on now, or had you already started working on the next thing?
Well, I knew I was going to sell for quite a while, and actually, Corn and I worked together, and my bookkeeping I had to fire my bookkeeper. So we were probably working on it for 6 months, and at that time, I was using a lot of my spare time to research products. I had gone to Canton Fair and just kind of keep my eye out for anything that caught my eye. So I hadn't pulled the trigger on anything by the time I sold, and then when I sold, I decided to take just 2 months completely off, any sort of work, email, anything, because I knew when I started the next business, I'd never have this time to just disconnect again.
Mm-hmm. Did you make the full 2 months?
I did, actually.
Oh, wow.
I had, I went diving in the Philippines. I spent a few weeks there. And then I met a buddy out in Colombia and spent 2 months in Colombia, in Medellin, which was incredible. And even though I was in a new place, I got bored at times. I'm like, I can't, go travel out the city all day, every day. And then I had another buddy of mine who's I respect an entrepreneur. I respect the hell out of him, and a bit older than I and wiser. And we were talking. It's like, well, now I have a pile of cash, and honestly, the business had been throwing off cash for a while, so I had most of that as well. And I didn't live lavishly, I lived nicely, but not really expensively. And we were chatting, and there's a lot of people on Amazon doing private label stuff and stuff that doesn't have very high barriers to entry. And the stuff I was doing wasn't at the time either. So you certainly can find success there, but I wanted to do something harder. And I also wanted to challenge myself. Put in perspective, the business that I sold, and again, I can't reveal the products, but I was doing private label. I was sourcing in the US, and my supply chain was fairly quick. So I was able to run, relatively low inventory levels and turn it over quickly. So my cash flow was awesome. I mean, I never had an issue with cash flow. And then, I got into, I went to Canton Fair and I found a product I just loved and thought was amazing and never seen before. And I had started doing research on that product before I sold the company. So I took my 2 months off and started doing some more product research. And this product I wanted to launch and test was going to cost me probably $70,000, $80,000 just to launch. And I'm used to my product launches costing me about $5,000 and cash flowing in month 2 or 3. And I ran the numbers and I basically make my money back in 3 or 4 months, 3 months, or when I sold the product. And I thought about that for a while, and that was a tough decision. And it came down to, I wanted to challenge myself and take myself to the next level on an entrepreneur level. And I had enough faith in myself that I wouldn't lose the money if things didn't work out. I could still make it back. So I decided to pull the trigger on that. And that product took longer than I thought. I visited many factories in China and spent some time there, which is a story in itself. And I had to design the product, and it took some time. It took me to get it to market. Probably took me, including shipping and the order and everything, probably took me 9 months. So it's been challenging, and now it's a very seasonal business, and the cash flow is completely the opposite. I need to make all my orders, one time during the year and putting out hundreds of thousands of dollars. Because if I don't do that and I miss the season, then it's a huge opportunity cost there. So that's the challenge of this business. And I also am testing the products myself and using them and constantly improving them. And it's much more hands-on and challenging. So it's fun, it's challenging, and that's sort of how I got into it. And since then, been pretty busy.
Wow. That sounds like quite the journey, mate. And you've kind of jumped out of a nice cash flowing business into something that's quite a bit harder. So that's interesting. So are you mostly focusing on Amazon for the second brand, or are you focusing outside of Amazon as well?
Well, yes and no. That's an interesting question. I still believe Amazon's probably the best place to start an e-com business. And, it's the easiest place to get some sales and some data. But I'm actually working with a handful of influencers who have other website properties and have some influence in the market. Because my product's so expensive, people will potentially find this on Amazon and they'll Google it as well, and they'll do research before they buy. So that's been huge for us. And right now, pushing a lot of stuff to our Amazon listing, but in the future, we want to push it to our actual e-com store because, as you can imagine, our margins are much better there. So that's kind of the overall goal. So my focus is to be, we sell a lot on Amazon. We also sell a decent amount on our website, even without much outside marketing at the moment. But our goal at some point is to be, Amazon will still probably be 60% of the business over the next few years. But, if I can get like 30%, anywhere from 25 to 40% of my website, that'll be huge for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And that also nicely will make the business more valuable if and when you do plan to sell in the future. So with the second business, because this is a niche that you're more interested in, and like you say, it's really one time of the year is where you make your money back. Is this one built to sell? Are you keeping it somewhat sale ready, or is this something you just want to keep doing because this is what you love doing?
Well, that's a great question. I think we should always have in mind that we're going to sell the business one day. Either you pass it down to your children, or we're no longer here and you have a succession plan, or you go through an exit. So I think that's always important to keep in your mind. Right now, that's in the back of my mind. But my this goal for this business is I want to hit an 8-figure sale, and I won't sell it before then. And if I could have this business for 10 or 15 years or longer, I'm happy with that. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, using what Corin did help me. It's my first large sale that Corin and I worked on, and he had so much help. I can't say nothing but good things about him. And I was a bit naive, and he told me exactly what needed to be done when he had to deliver bad news. He did it, and I learned a lot from that process. So applying what I've learned through here into the next business and laying the foundation for a future sale is huge, and I'm sure will be very beneficial if and when I do so.
That's awesome, mate. I love to hear that progression, and thanks for the kind words too. That's awesome. I enjoyed even the tough times on the deal, on every deal. I love all of it. It's crazy. So I can relate to what you're working on now as being more of a passion project, and you've built the skill set on the first business, released some cash from that. And now you can do something where you can really focus on it for a decent amount of time. And I don't really see there being a downside in that. You've got something that you enjoy doing, and you've got one eye on value at all times, which is great, because sometimes you do need to sell, right? And having the business 80-90% ready to sell at any given time, it's a smart move. So if you can keep doing that along the way while still enjoying what you're doing and working in a niche that you love, then there's no downside there. That's awesome. I'm so happy to have been a very small part in that process, but that's awesome, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. And Corin made a good point to me one time where you just don't know, like maybe this offer comes your way, maybe you need to sell, maybe something comes up, and being prepared for that never hurts you. And
yeah, absolutely.
You can always walk away from any deal, but not being ready for a potential deal can suck.
Yeah, we have a number of clients that reach out to us and they say, "Oh, look, I've got a strategic in my space that wants to buy me. What do I do now?" Like they don't have their books ready, they don't have their systems, they don't have anything. So at least moving towards what would be needed for a sale is that, like I said, there's no downside there. Absolutely. No, that's so cool. And so you're about to do some speaking, I hear. So what else are you working on, and how could people reach out to you and connect with you?
Yeah, so I'll be at the business conference in Phoenix. Came from the Fastlane Forum, MJ DeMarco, if you know him. And we've been doing that for 4 or 5 years. I've been asked to speak about my business exit there, I think for like 45 minutes. So if you're in that area, I'd love to meet up. There'll be 50 of us entrepreneurs hanging out for a week in February 7th. And we do it every year. What I'm working on now is obviously my current business. It's in the sporting goods category, and I'm funding it myself, but I'm also looking for any potential strategic partners if there's any synergy there as well. So feel free to contact me. And if you have any questions too, I'm happy to help. You know, if you don't know Corin and you want to ask me about him, I'm happy to help you there too.
Awesome. No, I appreciate that, Jason. And how can people get in touch with you? Do you have a website or an email, or
Yeah,
what
my
works best?
email is the best bet. It's just jason@jasonregan.net, just my name. I'm sure Corin can put that up, but it's JASON@JASONREGAN.net.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes as well. And yeah, that's amazing. And the last question I would like to ask you is, now you've been through the whole sale process and you've come out the other side with the perfect 2020 vision that hindsight is there anything that you would do differently?
I think so. I'm happy with the sale, and I'm also I don't contact the buyer very regularly, but we're on good terms, and he bought one of my new products. And I think he's pretty happy with his purchase. So
Awesome.
I'm happy that I sold, but I'm also happy that the business is alive and well, and that he's happy. That just makes me feel good. I will say something interesting changed where, I didn't have any money, I don't know, 7 years ago or 6 years ago. I mean, nothing. Like I was in debt, and going from, making a little bit of money to making a lot of money, and to having a really nice cash flowing business where, I just couldn't spend what I was making. And it was nice to, went to Hong Kong and bought this Rolex that I was like wanted for a while, and okay, no big deal. The money's replenished next month. Great. Going from that to selling and having, a nice bank account balance, but at the moment I wasn't making any money off that, kind of changed my mindset. Now I'm like, wow, every dollar I spend, my net worth goes down a little bit. And that was frustrating, and I was like, well, it kind of motivated me to get working on the next business. So if I were to do it again, I would probably have launched my other company already, since I was only working 4 hours a week. Not that it's a big regret, and I'm happy that I took time off, but your mindset definitely shifts. And at that point, I was so focused on, e-commerce, I didn't have any other investments, cash flowing or passive income at the time. So yeah, 2 things. One would be, if your business is throwing off a lot of cash, obviously save it for taxes, whatever else you need. I would definitely suggest, investing either in real estate or something where your money is a lot more secure than in e-com. And then, so if you do sell, and I didn't sell for like 8 figures. I had not retirement money, but in my opinion, I needed 8 figures to retire. If you don't sell for that much, I would just say, invest wisely. Yeah, that's the only mindset shift that happened for me. And to note, I guess a bigger one for me is, now that this business is so cash flow intensive, that was a big hurdle for me to get through. I'm placing $100,000 orders now, where in the previous business, my orders were, 5 to 10,000 at a time. So that was a big mental hurdle to get through. And having the right mentors and people you really look up to really help and guide you through those decisions. And that's been huge for me. And I don't think I would have, probably gotten into this business if it wasn't for the trust of some really close, successful friends. So that's really important.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. And that's something we want to focus on here at the podcast, Truth About Exits, because I've come across this myself in my own history, and also with a lot of clients. You're so focused building the business and optimizing the business that you don't necessarily take the time to take cash off the table and invest in something else. and start figuring that whole game out. That can take some of our mutual friends that have sold. It's taken them a year or two to really get the investing side nailed, right? And why not do that while you still have the cash flowing business? Because a pile of cash in the bank is very different to cash coming in every week, every month. The change that happens is visceral. You feel it in your physiology. And I was actually listening to a podcast with John Paul DeJora, who launched Patron Tequila and a bunch of other businesses. The tagline of this was homeless to billionaire. He was actually homeless twice on his way to becoming a billionaire, which was pretty amazing. It was on the Ultimate Entrepreneur podcast. I just pulled up my Instagram because I posted about this just a little bit ago. But one of the tips that he mentioned in this episode, which I thought was genius, he said, despite having these multi-billion-dollar brands that he's a part of, he never put all of his money back into any one of those ventures. He always paid himself first and put that money, the money that he drew other than salary, he put into really secure, safe investments for him and his family. So regardless of what happened with the business, he would always be building this wealth in the background. And that's the first person I've actually heard talk about wealth that way. Most people say put everything into the business or go all into real estate. I haven't heard someone talk about diversification like that. When you think about it, that makes a lot of sense to start making those moves and building that skill set, putting in the reps of how to invest your money in a more secure fashion than a business. A business, even if it's diversified, is somewhat high risk, right? Can be great returns, but high risk. So yeah, that's a really good point that you bring up, and something we'll be interviewing a lot of people that are on the investor side that have, after the exit, just invest or were investing along the way or are actual full-time investors. So I think that's going to be a good point to jump off at there. That was an awesome tip that you left at the end there.
Yeah, and I just want to say from my mindset, I have a friend he's not a billionaire, but he has the same mindset. He had a successful business and he put things into low-risk real estate, and they don't make amazing returns, but over time, that's retirement. I mean, he could retire on that cash flow if he needed to. And I think that's huge. And then I wanted to leave you guys with one thing. I know this is a new podcast, but I met Corin at a business conference in Bangkok, and had no clue I'd end up working with him. And I'm so glad I did. So I did speak with a few brokers before Corin, and there's a lot of good brokers out there for sure. But one thing that stood out to me about Corin above the others is he never once BS'd me. Everything was straightforward and clear. And I got the sense that he was extremely honest and, would deliver bad news if there was some and good news. And that's been very true. And I think that made our relationship working together work extremely well. So I just wanted to say that about him. And I really, really appreciate, you and people like you.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for that, Jason. It's nice to hear that feedback. And I appreciate it. That's what we try to do here is just tell it like it is. And I know that in the long run, that's all that I would want. So yeah, that's what we strive to do. So I appreciate that came through in the whole entire transaction, and we're still mates. We still catch up when we're in the same place, which is rare these days, but hopefully we'll be catching up again soon and we can talk about the next phase. And awesome. Well, thanks so much for jumping on the show, Jason. I really appreciate it. Like I mentioned, we'll put your contact details in the show notes. It's jason@jasonregan.net if you want to reach out to Jason and talk to him about anything, partnering up or his experience, or even have him talk at an event about his exit. So I appreciate you, Jason, as a person, as a friend, and also as a former client. So thanks so much and have a great day.
Thanks, Corin. You too.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Truth About Exits. Now, whenever you're ready, here are 3 ways I can help you. If your company is doing between 10 to 50 million plus in revenue and you want help to plan your perfect exit to achieve the highest value and best deal terms possible, or if you'd like advice on acquiring other companies to continue to grow your company, we can help. Go to truthaboutexits.com/consult. There you'll see a simple form to tell us a little bit more about you, your company, and your goals, and my team and I will take it from there. So go to truthaboutexits.com/consult. The second way I can help is become a guest on our show. If you've had a successful exit, you want to share your story, or if you're actively acquiring other businesses and want to share your criteria with our audience, go to truthaboutexits.com/guest. Let's connect, and I'd love to talk to you. The third way I can help you is one of my favorite things in the entire world is sharing the Truth About Exit stories with other entrepreneurs by speaking at events all over the world. So far, I've had the privilege of speaking at events in the US, Canada, UK, Spain, Germany, Ukraine, Czech Republic, over in Asia, China, Hong Kong, Thailand, and even Australia. If you would like me to speak at your next event, go to truthaboutexits.com/speaker and tell me a little bit more about your event, and we'll go from there. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode.